In the early 1990s, everyone living in Nehe County, Heilongjiang Province, knew about the shocking massacre that left 42 people dead. At that time, people would often say, "If you don't want to live, go to Nehe." This phrase alone highlighted the severity of the case. To this day, people are still haunted by the sight of dozens of bodies piled up, severely decomposed. Today, let's uncover who the killer behind this gruesome crime was and what motivated such brutal actions. Hello, welcome to Crime Documentary Files. On a cold winter night in 1991, temperatures in Heilongjiang had dropped so low that everything was frozen. In the duty room of the Nehe Police Bureau, a long phone ring suddenly echoed. Hello, this is the Heilongjiang Police Bureau. We need your assistance in investigating a major case. At least 20 people have been killed. Realizing the severity of the murder case, the officer immediately reported the situation to his superiors. After quickly devising a plan, Nehe police promptly headed to the provided address. "Open the door," ordered the police bureau chief. The cellar door was swiftly flung open. Despite being mentally prepared, the scene before them left the officers in shock. Many present bowed their heads and vomited. The small cellar was filled with bodies in various states of decomposition. Some were mere skeletons, while others retained their shapes. The Nehe police stood in stunned silence, deeply aware of their failure to prevent this tragedy. Determined, they vowed to solve the case as quickly as possible. The scene was cordoned off within minutes. Forensic doctors began working on the piled-up bodies. The freezing winter weather couldn't mask the overwhelming stench of decay. Despite the sub-zero temperatures outside, inside the cramped cellar, everyone was drenched in sweat. Some older forensic doctors even fainted. At the lowest level, the corpses were severely decomposed, many reduced to bones by insects. The small, poorly lit cellar made the investigation extremely challenging. The deeper the investigators went, the more suffocating the air became. Some officers experienced oxygen deprivation and poisoning from the stench. This horrific crime quickly captured the attention of international media. Chinese media continuously covered the investigation led by the Heilongjiang and Nehe police. The public was deeply disturbed, uncertain of the killer's motives, and fearing they might be the next target. The phrase, "If you don't want to live, go to Nehe," spread once again, heightening the community's anxiety while the killer remained at large. Snow fell heavily over the streets of Nehe. Everyone longed for the night to pass quickly, for the sun to rise and dispel the dark fog that clouded their hearts. After searching every corner of the cellar, the police found more than 40 bodies. They concluded that this was a large-scale massacre carried out by a gang with multiple members. In the past year, Nehe had seen a series of mysterious disappearances, mostly of young women with attractive faces. When the news of the bodies was reported, families came forward to identify their loved ones. Facial recognition and DNA tests confirmed that the bodies belonged to those who had been reported missing. Despite the heart-wrenching truth, the reality was that these unfortunate girls had lost their lives here. The public was outraged, not only by the brutality of the killers, but also by the negligence of the security forces. The question on everyone's mind was, where was the government while Nehe was plunged into this tragedy? To restore public trust, the authorities mobilized a specialized investigative team, including dozens of special forces officers who scoured the area day and night for any suspects. However, with few clues, it was difficult to narrow down the search. Despite the challenges, the police persevered, questioning everyone from criminals to the elderly and children. Through this method, they identified a group of suspects and interrogated them, but none had a motive for the crime. The police suspected that the perpetrators were a professional criminal gang that had fled to other areas after being discovered. As time passed, the snow and ice gradually melted, and the sun finally appeared. Yet, to everyone's dismay, the police could only provide vague answers. The public began to doubt the government's competence, inadvertently creating immense pressure on the investigative team. However, luck finally turned in their favor, albeit belatedly. After months of relentless effort, there was a breakthrough in the case. One night, during a routine train watch, the local security force spotted a very suspicious individual. As night fell, Hangzhou Station became bustling. At this critical transportation hub, the police maintained high alert, especially Li An and Little Wang, who patrolled the station daily. In the early 1990s, social security in the country was unstable. As one of the major southern stations, Hangzhou Station frequently experienced thefts and scams. One night, while on patrol, Little Wang noticed something unusual. He spotted a young woman, about 20 years old, with short hair and an attractive face. Despite the warm October weather in Hangzhou, she was wearing a thick sweater. What caught Wang's attention was that she was talking to a man who looked very shady. The man had a lecherous face, dark skin, and was wearing a thin shirt typical of Southern style. With his years of experience, Little Wang sensed that this meeting was suspicious. Such incidents often occurred at train stations, where shady characters exploited the crowds to conduct illegal transactions in various forms. A little later, Little Wang noticed 3 men standing several meters away, staring intently at the pair. 2 of them were shabbily dressed and rough-looking, possibly manual laborers. The third was younger, fair-skinned, with a high nose and handsome features. However, their eyes were all filled with malice, which made Little Wang keep a close watch on them. He suspected that this might be a gang using women to lure customers. Once they ensnared a victim, the woman would scream and pretend to be assaulted. Others would then step in, posing as her husband or relative, demanding compensation for the alleged assault. Keeping a close eye on them, Little Wang decided to stay put and asked Leon to call for backup. Leon quickly ran to the duty room and summoned 3 team members. They equipped themselves with batons, handcuffs, and carefully brought along a pistol. By this time, the woman had left the station with the man. The 3 other men followed them. Little Wang discreetly moved without revealing his presence. Sure enough, the woman led the man into a nearby alley. The 3 men quickly followed. The woman's accomplices then grabbed the victim, accusing him of harassing the woman and demanding compensation. The man was confused, insisting that he had agreed with the woman on a consensual encounter. The leader of the group denied the woman's involvement in prostitution and adamantly demanded money. One of the gang members then hit the victim on the head, while another drew a dagger, threatening to take all his belongings. At this point, Little Wang and his 4 teammates swiftly surrounded the area. Sensing trouble, the gang leader tried to explain away their actions as a personal misunderstanding, claiming they didn't want to involve the police. However, the victim immediately refuted this, stating that he had not harassed the woman, and she had agreed to spend the night for an agreed sum. Confronted with the armed suspect, Little Wang raised his gun and warned them to drop the knife before being taken into custody. Realizing they had no other choice, the suspect dropped the knife and put his hands up to be cuffed. However, just as the police were about to take them away, the gang leader suddenly shoved an officer and tried to escape, but was ultimately stopped by a local security guard. All suspects were then taken in for questioning. When the police interrogated the suspects, the 3 men claimed they were immigrants from Harbin. They said they intended to teach the man a lesson for his inappropriate behavior, and that the money he handed over was voluntary compensation for emotional distress. Beyond that, they refused to provide any additional information. However, upon further investigation, the police discovered that all 4 of their IDs were fake. Normally, upstanding citizens don't use false identification, indicating that these individuals were involved in suspicious activities. Their suspicions were heightened when the woman began to shake and turn pale. The police were now convinced that these individuals were involved in something far more sinister. Sensing the woman's distress, the police questioned her repeatedly. During the interrogation, she seemed on the verge of revealing something but hesitated. She then awkwardly requested a sanitary pad. After receiving the pad and pretending to leave, she whispered to the officer, "I'm being forced to kill people. Please help me." The woman, who identified herself as Shu Lixia, later confessed that she and the others had been involved in several murders. The victims came from various groups. Suspecting that these individuals were linked to the horrific massacre in Nehe, the police immediately reported this to their superiors. It was revealed that the leader of this group was Jia Wenge, a worker at an agricultural factory in Nehe County, Heilongjiang Province. Born in 1960 into a poor family, Jia Wenge lost his parents early and lacked proper supervision, leading him to neglect his studies. After finishing middle school, he struck out on his own. Despite his lack of education, his good looks and smooth talking won him the favor of many women at the factory. Though pursued by many women, his arrogance led him to reject them. Beneath his charming exterior lay a dark ambition. His indulgent lifestyle caused him to fall in with a bad crowd, shirking honest work. Neighbors frequently saw him and his friends drinking, gambling, and going to bars. While working at the factory, Jia Wenge engaged in numerous illicit relationships with female workers, eventually leading to his dismissal. After leaving the factory, he took up animal slaughtering, but business was slow, making his life difficult. Seeking more money, he decided to turn to crime, choosing the path of robbery and murder. Around July 1990, Jia Wenge began prowling the streets looking for victims. He targeted young, gullible women. With his good looks, Jia Wenge managed to lure dozens of women back to his home. After having sex with them, he would rob them of their valuables and then murder them. Those who tried to resist faced even more brutal violence. Instead of disposing of the bodies, he threw them into his cellar. Rumors spread that killing and robbing had become his twisted hobby. It was said that he even slept with the corpses day and night. Even more horrifying, Jia Wenge reportedly dissected the bodies, removing hearts, livers, and genital organs to fry or cook, and actually ate them. From January to August 1991, Jia Wenge and his accomplices formed a gang specializing in luring and robbing victims. Jia Wenge recruited Li Shuhua, a farmer from Jiangdong town, and Sun Wenli, a worker at a vegetable company. Together, they committed heinous crimes. To facilitate their criminal activities, Jia Wenge and his gang rented a house locally. In the first half of 1991, many people in Nehe began disappearing, both men and women. Terrified, locals avoided going out at night for fear of becoming the killer's next target. Among the victims was someone particularly noteworthy, Shulixia. Shulixia was a nanny at a kindergarten for the families of Nehe agricultural factory employees. According to her statement, she and Jia Wenge were neither married nor in a romantic relationship. She was coerced into participating in his criminal activities. Shulixia confessed that on a night in October 1991, she was beaten and thrown out of her home by her drunken husband, leaving her to wander the streets in fear. The desolate, dimly lit road terrified her. She became disoriented and ran towards the train station, which was busy and well lit, offering a semblance of safety. There she encountered Jia Wenge. Swayed by his sweet words and strong physique, she quickly fell for his deceit and followed him home. His house was not far from the station. He claimed to live with his elderly parents, which made her trust him even more, and they soon arrived at Jia Wenge's home. As soon as Shulixia stepped inside, she noticed that the house had only 3 rooms and a fairly spacious yard. However, she quickly realized that Jia Wenge's mother was not there. Instead, his wife, Li Shuhua, and a young girl were present. Upon seeing Shulixia, Li Shuhua looked at her with disdain. Sensing something was wrong, Shulixia tried to find an excuse to leave, but Jia Wenge suddenly grabbed her and nearly strangled her to death. Terrified, Shulixia was forced to undress, and then he raped her. Jia Wenge's wife witnessed the entire scene but showed no concern, taking the child to sleep in the next room. Shulixia woke up crying and tried to get dressed to leave, but Jia Wenge grabbed her by the neck again and knocked her out. When she regained consciousness, she found herself in a foul-smelling cellar. It was pitch dark, and she suddenly felt something resembling flesh surrounding her. Shulixia was horrified to realize she was lying among a pile of corpses. Terrified, she used all her strength to push the door, but it wouldn't budge. She kicked it hard, but to no avail. While she struggled in despair, Jia Wenge appeared, holding a dagger. Seeing the knife, Shulixia knelt down in fear, begging him not to kill her. She promised to do anything to save her life. Jia Wenge told her that if she agreed to work for him, he would spare her. Shulixia hastily agreed. Continuing her confession to the police about Jia Wenge's gang, Shulixia revealed that Jia Wenge and his accomplices had lured several wealthy acquaintances, inviting them to dinner and then killing them after they were drunk. However, as the number of victims increased, Jia Wenge started to feel that this method was too risky and could easily attract police attention. Therefore, Jia Wenge proposed that Shulixia pose as a seductress to lure men back to their home, where they would be killed. Initially, Shulixia refused, but Jia Wenge threatened to kill her, her parents, and her sister. Left with no choice, Shulixia was forced to comply. At night, Shulixia would go to the train station, dress provocatively to attract men, and lure them back to the house. Once inside, Shulixia would slip into the next room under the pretext of changing clothes. Then, Jia Wenge and his two accomplices would burst in, brutally murdering the men and robbing them of their belongings. Initially, they used axes to behead the victims or stabbed them with daggers. After each murder, the house would be drenched in blood, taking days to clean up the evidence. Despite the victims' struggles and loud cries for help, no one ever heard them. This gruesome process continued until the cellar was filled with corpses. After many hours of interrogation, Jia Wenge and his accomplices finally confessed to their brutal murders. In January 1992, Nehe was shrouded in a heavy and tense atmosphere. During these days, the local people's court held a public trial. According to the indictment, within just 2 years, from March 1989 to October 1991, Jia Wenge and his associates had killed 42 people, including 18 men and 24 women. However, from the time of their arrest to their execution, Jia Wenge and his accomplices remained extremely calm. The murderer Jia Wenge couldn't even recall the exact number of his victims. Although authorities confirmed the number to be 42, many believe the actual count could be higher, as some victims' families did not report the crimes. Several bodies had been burned to ashes, including those of foreigners, and many missing persons cases were mentioned at the time. According to reports, the Heilongjiang Provincial Police Department concluded its investigation on December 26, 1991, and filed charges on December 31st of the same year. On January 9, 1992, the 4 criminals in the Jia Wenge case were executed according to the law. As per regulations before execution, the criminals were paraded through the streets. Prison vehicles drove around Nehe to demonstrate justice and soothe the public's emotions. Years have passed, but the massacre remains a terrifying memory for the people of Nehe. No one speaks of that painful chapter, but the truth remains. The tragedy happened. Because the exact death dates of the victims are unknown, locals commemorate the sentencing day of the murderers as the Victims' Memorial Day. Every year, the people of Nehe hold a ceremony to remember the unfortunate victims. For the residents of Nehe, there will never be a day to remember those murderers. Thank you for watching today's video. Please let us know your thoughts about this case by commenting below. Goodbye, and see you next time.